So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the UK steel industry anger as the government looks to drop EU import restrictions. So what this means is the UK are going to get rid of the restrictions, so tariffs and quotas, to stop cheaper foreign exports getting into the UK that are going to undermine the British steel industry. So this is another industry being thrown under the bus here. We've already seen services thrown under the bus, especially financial ones. We've seen the fishing industry thrown under the bus. We've seen the farming industry thrown under the bus. Now steel is getting thrown under the bus too. So a government body has recommended the removal of limits inherited from the EU on about half of the UK steel imports in a move that provoked fury from British producers. We've already seen, British manufacturers struggle as is due to, cheap imports and the fact that the industry isn't as busy as it normally is. That's another issue. But, these jobs are, decently paid manufacturing jobs, and the UK is at risk of losing them. The Trade Remedies Authority said on Friday that it would revoke the limits on 9 categories of steel product, including some bars and wires, meaning imports will no longer face steep tariffs and quotas after quotas are being filled. So after a quota is filled, the rest of the imports face massive tariffs. And the issue is that the UK could use these quotas, these sort of limits, in trade negotiations with other countries. For example, China. They could say, look, we'll reduce, we'll increase quotas or maybe reduce tariffs on steel imports from China as part of a potential trade deal, or with other countries that manufacture steel. But instead, we're not doing that. We're just gonna arbitrarily get rid of them. That's so stupid. Genuinely is. The EU introduced the limits in 2019 to protect the industry from a glut of steel products diverted from the US after Donald Trump imposed tariffs. And another issue is that the UK was one of the main beneficiaries of these EU tariffs, these EU quotas, etc. We were a massive beneficiary of these because we do produce a lot of steel. The TRA is sponsored by the Department for International Trade, run by Liz Truss. She has to sign off on the authority's recommendations, but she's expected to accept them. Why? This is more leverage in any potential trade deal if you want to get rid of these quotas and tariffs anyways. Why are you doing this? Do you not understand how to negotiate? I don't get it. Gareth Stace, the Director General of the industry lobby group UK Steel, said the decision was a hammer blow and utter madness that would leave the UK producers vulnerable to import surges. And the thing is, if the EU keep their quotas in place, that means that a lot of these exports are going to go to the UK because we're the next closest market. Why are we doing this? That would leave, our own producers vulnerable because, companies that need steel can get cheaper imports from other countries rather than using British manufacturers. On their first major test in a post-Brexit trading environment, the UK's new system has failed our domestic steel sector. I wouldn't say this is the first test, but this is another test that we failed. The UK failing to protect steel manufacturing, which can be vital. If there's a shortage internationally of steel, you could use domestic producers to make up for any shortfall if you need steel for HS2 or other infrastructure projects. What don't the UK understand about this? I don't get it. The TRA removed the limits on some products because it did not find evidence that the UK was importing them in large quantities. Not yet. I don't understand. So surely you just leave them there then. If these aren't an issue, you just leave them in place just in case you face a surge. Or that increased imports would have caused significant damage to the UK steel industry as a whole. I mean, that's a load of rubbish, isn't it? Otherwise, these things wouldn't exist. If there was no potential damage to the UK steel industry, these quotas and tariffs wouldn't exist because we don't do planning in the future for any kind of crisis in the UK. I think, the pandemic has pointed that out very clearly. This is so stupid from the British government. Just because we aren't using some of these tariffs and quotas now doesn't mean that they won't be for good use in the future. And especially when you can use this as leverage in trade negotiations as well. This is so short-sighted from the British government. The steel industry also argued that the government had failed to take into account the effect on small-scale producers and that the removal of protections on certain products could undermine the industry as a whole by denting overall volumes. And that if companies can import massive amounts from other countries, for example, that puts out small manufacturers that support local economies. Again, this is just so I don't get it. The UK has been examining which EU import protections to retain after it's left the EU single market on the 31st of December 2020. Some government figures have said removing trade barriers was a key advantage to leaving the EU. But like, if you're telling me these barriers aren't a major issue, why are you getting rid of them in the first place? I don't get it. I mean, this story here is a joke as well. This story here, this is one I haven't seen yet. Those are two I'll keep for later. But this whole situation here, I mean, the one of the reasons why these protections, especially in 2019, were put in was to protect the British market from cheaper exports, specifically from countries like China. And now we're getting rid of them. So we're going to start importing loads of cheap steel and get rid of our domestic manufacturing, just like we're getting rid of domestic agriculture, domestic fisheries. All of this is going. This is crazy. The prospect of competing with the rest of the world has alarmed some industries, however, including steel and farming, which argue they are unable to compete on a level playing field because of the higher regulatory standards and costs in the UK. Electricity costs are far higher in the UK than they are in other parts of the world. Wages are far higher. Safety standards are way higher. And this is a reason why we cannot compete with other countries like China. We just can't, even though they're quite far away. We cannot compete with them because of the lower standards they have. So getting rid of this, will damage British steel manufacturing, puts us in a more vulnerable situation if there is a global shortage. And not to mention, this will damage local economies who rely on these steel manufacturing plants for employment. These are decently paid manufacturing jobs, and we're going to get rid of them. Why? I don't get it. If there's no real benefit here of getting rid of these tariffs and quotas. So in the comments, if you can figure out and if you know the truth, let me know in the comments below. The channel's on Patreon now. I'll leave a link in the description if you can support the channel. That'd be great. But if not, just like, comment, share, subscribe. And if you have the answers for this video, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.